Thank you. With that, I will call this meeting to order. Waupaca County Board of Supervisors, Tuesday, October 31st, 2017 session. Please press your roll call buttons. Oh, sorry.
24 in attendance, 2 are excused.
Clerk, has our open meeting statement been fulfilled?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Okay, again, as I just mentioned, we're going to stand for the silent meditation and pledge. When we stand in silent meditation, please remember the thoughts of prayers for Mr. Fleece's continued recovery. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we'll need a motion to approve the agenda before us. A motion by Mr. McClone, a second by Mr. Zog to approve the agenda. Any questions? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
Likewise, the minutes of the September 19th, 2017 meeting. There's a motion by Mr. Murphy for approval. Gerald Murphy, that is. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Terry Murphy. Any questions regarding that? Seeing none, please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
Okay, next, of course, we're really here to hear the facts and figures of the proposed 2018 budget. Before I have our Finance Director, Heidi Dombrowski, before us, I'm going to ask our Finance Chair, Dwayne Frederowitz, for a few words, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you're like me and have 2 cars in your family, probably within the last few weeks or so, a light might have came on in your car and said your tire pressure was low. And that happens usually this time of the year as the air density changes. Mine came on about 3 days ago and my wife's about 3 weeks ago. But it's good that they have a light like that, because without that light you would have no idea if your pressure is 1 pound or 2 pounds low, and your tires would wear and cost you a little more money. Anyway, I thought about that light in the budget. The budget's not like a light, but the annual budget does bring on a light. It allows every organization to start anew, think outside the box, see what can be accomplished and what can't be accomplished. I'm just going to read a few comments that I made last night that I was thinking about this meeting today, and hopefully they'll be helpful to each of you as you deliberate through this budget process. It's something that happens every year, and yet it's very important to our employees and to the organization and to the people we represent. As a result of closing of Lakeview Nursery Home, discontinuing Waupaca County Industries, a strong fund balance, and other positive factors will result in Heidi Dombrowski, our Finance Director, to present a budget that accomplishes many items that were discussed by the department heads during the budget process. You will be informed how we, supervising, representing our constituents, by not needing to bond for roads and other capital items going forward, which was originally thought to be $9.9 million. This will have a savings for your constituents of over $1 million of interest and about $200 in normal bonding cost. Some of you like to look through the full budget process line by line. It was my understanding the Finance Committee at one time went through line by line. It was my observation when I came that this was not fruitful. There is a checks and balance in place, this being each department brings their part of the budget to the respective committee for approval, and then the Finance Committee reviews this again. This year we added the Executive Committee to have the exactly what was heard by the Finance Committee a week earlier. If after reading of the budget in a few minutes a board member has a question or concern, they can bring it to the Finance meeting on or before November 8th of this year. Therefore, when the budget is presented for approval on November 14th, all concerns should have been addressed. To bring up an item on the 14th should be rare at best, since any changes result really in a breach of trust, since the finance director has no way to properly respond. I hope this information is beneficial. It is only after being on this board and on the Finance Committee for a number of years that I finally have a good grasp of our budget, because each organization's budget is different. Yes, Heidi and myself, we do talk about some philosophical issues. However, I want to make sure that all credit for this budget belongs to her and her department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fedowitz. Now we present you Heidi Dombrowski, our Finance Director. Good morning, Heidi.
Morning. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm just going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. You do have a book on your desk with a more detailed version of what's in the budget, but I believe hitting on the highlights through the PowerPoint presentation will be much more beneficial than going through the book. But if you have any questions as we go through, if we need to address the book, be more than happy to do so. As Supervisor Fedowitz had mentioned that this budget process was a little bit of a different mindset. There were a few different changes of the way we do business. And as you mentioned, the first change that we made through this budget process was in credit to the Health and Human Services Department. As you all are aware, they have eliminated the services provided at Waupaca County Industries, and those services will now be provided by an outside agency that will be awarded by Community Care. By eliminating the services, this has allowed for the Health and Human Services to change their business model and to provide additional client resources to other service programs that they are offering on second floor. The services will be expanded mostly in the behavioral health unit, but also offers additional support to children and families, economic support areas, etc. In the budget, there is a remodel project to accommodate the additional staff, which is estimated to be about $178,000. And they have applied fund balance to fund that project, and with the understanding that approximately $155,000 of that they will receive in 2019 to offset some of those costs, but they will have to upfront that for 2018. This total overall business model changes really had no levy effect within the budget. It was just a way of taking resources from one area and applying them to another. The other key note here is depending on who provides those services and if they continue to provide them at WCI and they're able to, depending on what the future of that facility is, that could be a facility that actually ends up on our tax roll, which it currently is not. It's a business that is county run. So that's another plus to that process. As we all know, Lakeview Manor ceased its operations in 2014, and the budget does reflect the elimination of those operations, but we do have some building maintenance costs that about $86,000 that we're anticipating, and fund balance has been applied in that fund for those additional costs. It is anticipated, though, that once those assets are liquidated, until the asset is liquidated, that the funds will continue to have expenditures within that fund to maintain the assets. So, but once the assets are liquidated, the remaining fund equity should probably close out for future capital expenditures. The net operating levy impact is a savings of $937,593 for this budget process. As a matter of practice, Waupaca County has issued debt to pay for its annual capital projects. Traditionally, the bond proceeds of approximately $4 million annually have been applied to pay for the capital expenditures. On an average, the county has borrowed that same amount from its own operating capacity for the annual repayment of debt. This budget does not reflect any new debt for the annual capital improvements in the governmental funds and reduces the amount borrowed from its operating capacity. The debt service levy for 18 is about approximately $5.5 million, and it's compared to 6.1 for a reduction of $646,088. Kind of give you a history. This is kind of small to see, but you can see that back in 12, 13, and 14, our equalized value reduced by TID increment was actually dropped pretty significantly, but in 18 we're actually picking it up to about $4 billion. So that is a helpful process within the tax rate itself. But this slide kind of shows you from 2009 up to 2018. The yellow portion is what our debt capacity is, and the actual is what we've actually claimed as debt on our levy limit worksheet. So you can see we've traditionally have borrowed from our own operating capacity for the debt repayment and have not passed that on to the taxpayer. So you can kind of see back in here in 2018, we're taking and using more of our operating capacity to pay for capital expenditures rather than taking out additional debt. And so we'll be applying more of our debt capacity for the actual debt repayment. The capital expenditures are one of the largest items within the budget. The capital improvements for the governmental fund in the 2018 budget amount to about $9 million, and that's an increase of about 3.6 from 2017. The tax levy applied to fund the projects is $3.9 million as compared to $817,516 from 2017, which is about a $3 million increase. Net savings in the nursing home operations and the debt service were applied to help pay for those capital projects. And the remainder, 1.5, is actually funded with a levy increase. The estimated debt service, if the debt were to have been issued for these projects for 2018, would have been about $1,078,000. So instead of making a $1,078,000 debt service payment, we're applying that to capital. Well, the remainder, $5.8 million of capital expenditures, are funded as you can see. Originally we're going to fund the fiber optic cable from Manawa to Simcoe Tower and the radio tower upgrades with debt levy or debt bond proceeds. So we're applying $1.3 million in the fund balance in the general fund to accommodate those two capital expenditures. The Transportation Services Fund is now where we're putting the highway construction projects. So you'll see most of the levy increase for capital in the Transportation Services Fund. but then we're applying 2.1 million of committed fund balance in that fund to pay for those construction projects. Remember, in 2016 and 17 budget process, we had levied $500,000 2 years in a row. So that's $1 million of that is actually coming from previous years, working up to get to this point. And then we're applying 1.2 million of nursing home cash reserves to fund an estimated $1.6 million expenditure for the courthouse exterior issues that have been identified through the preliminary stages of the courthouse facility study. It's a pretty large expenditure, so although a lot of you have heard about what the issues are, I'm going to ask Ron, our maintenance director, to come up and actually go through some of what the issues are on the courthouse building so that everyone is aware, because it is a fairly large expense within the budget process.
Good morning. Some of you may have seen this already, and some of you may not have. When we did our facility study with Dimension 4, the initial stages, they brought in a lot of engineers. They went pretty much thoroughly through the whole building, top to bottom, and they did come across some issues with the outside of the building that basically need to be addressed, somewhat on an important basis. As most of you know, the outside of the building is mainly just all brickwork and windows. At the very top of the building, there's those higher levels that they call the parapet walls, and those had some issues with the brickwork starting to separate from the building actually, and some cracking going on. The caulking on the building, after looking at that, basically all the caulking on the building is failing. There's a lot of cracking going on, which is allowing the moisture to get behind that brickwork, which is probably one of the main causes of the first item with the failure. The third item, the steel plate brick relief, which you'll see in a few moments on some of the pictures. Basically every level of the building, you have the brickwork that goes up to the first level, then they have a steel plate, and then the brickwork continues on from that, and then another steel plate, and so on. Basically what that is, it's helping support each level of brickwork with that steel plate. So if we start on the top of the building, this is what they call the parapet walls, and it's basically got the flashing on the top. And over time, there's been cracking going on, and you can kind of see it. I don't know how good you can see it from the rear there, but where the mortar joints are, it's basically cracking away. And as you get into winter, you get that moisture behind there, and there is the potential for failure on that where the brickwork could actually separate and actually drop. This is kind of an example. This is actually not the building itself, but the dumpster enclosure. But it's giving you a good idea of what they're talking about. As the moisture gets behind here and you start to get the freezing behind, you can see how the brickwork actually will pop apart and drop off. Now this isn't as extreme an issue because it's ground, but if you have that happening on one of the upper levels, it could be quite dangerous. This is just a view from above that kind of shows you all the areas where the concern is. It's basically every level, when you look at the front of the building, that has that larger upper level. You can kind of see it on the picture of the courthouse in the back of the room there. But each one of these has been thoroughly inspected, and basically every single one of them does have somewhat of an issue, some worse than others. And this is basically just showing you some of the examples. This is probably really hard to see from where you are back there, but there's basically cracking going on in the mortar joints. Just about every single one of them, you can kind of see, has some damage. Right there. Okay, so with that moisture getting behind that brickwork, the big concern is I don't know if you can really see it from back there, but you have separation through the mortar joints where it's cracking. But then as it goes down, you can kind of follow this. It actually cracks right through a couple of the bricks, back in the mortar joint, through another brick, and basically goes all the way down through there. So before we go on to this one, basically talking with the engineers on the whole problem with the brickwork, the discussion came up, is it something that's, you know, immediate? Is it gonna fail in the next year? Their answer is it could, but there's really no way to tell. But with the cracking going on, it's basically a safety issue that they feel, and I feel, that it needs to be addressed right away. But as we go on to the issue on the caulk, basically all the big tiles around the courthouse, all those big tiles, they have them all caulked in between each of them. And you can kind of see through that caulk line that it's all cracking. Basically each one. And that's what's really allowing that moisture behind those big tiles to get through there. We don't have cracking on the big tiles, but with the ability for that water to get in there, it's going to cause problems in the long run. This is just some more examples of the caulk. It's very hard to tell, but where it comes up to the brick, that's all cracking along there. Basically what they need to do is they have to go in, pull out the old caulk, and re-caulk all those joints. Right there. Okay, so now that the steel plate brick relief, that's what I was talking about, where each level on the building, you get up to the one level, and they have that steel plate that helps support the next level of brickwork. And as you can tell, right where that steel plate is, there's a lot of rusting going on. If you go around the building, there's many areas that have that going on, and that's basically from up above where that moisture's gotten behind the brickwork, worked its way down, and now it's rusting out that plate. There's just some more pictures of the same thing. Kind of hard to tell, but if you have a moment sometime, you're coming up to the building, just kind of take a look, and you can see it's fairly noticeable. Especially on the back side of the building near the tower here, you can just see the rust lines coming down. And that's something that needs to be taken care of. Basically, that steel plate will eventually rust through and fail. How soon, no one really knows, but it's something that should just be taken care of sooner than later. So with all that work, they did somewhat of a breakdown of estimates with the parapet walls. They're looking at roughly about $800,000. That's with the engineering fees. They would come up with a design and plan to remove or repair all those areas up on the roof. The caulking, that came in at $100,000. That would include the removal of the old caulking, and while they're going through the whole process, they would also be power washing the building in the same project. And the steel plate brick relief, that came in at $400,000 with the engineering fees. That's come through as an estimate. I haven't really spoken with the engineers to get an idea of what the whole process is with that, but that would be done in the engineering part of that project. They would have a better explanation of how they would repair that. And that would bring it up to a cost of $1.6 million to cover all those items. Does anyone have any questions on any of that?
What's the warranty on that if they would do this?
That hasn't been discussed, but
So there isn't any at this point.
no, they would get into the design work and the engineering and come up with a solution for the repairs on that, and at that point, we would have an idea of what kind of warranty. Terry?
How do you fix that steel plate?
That, I'm not quite sure how they handle that. I know they were speaking of how they would remove part of the brickwork and slip that new plate in, but that would be something that would be discussed more with the engineering part of it. If we go through with the project, they would have their engineers design and come up with a solution to repair that.
In other words, what you're saying is that that steel plate doesn't run the whole length of the wall. It's piecemeal.
It does run the whole length. I don't believe it's one solid run though. I think it is piece.
It would be done in sections.
Mr. Nygaard?
Yes, sir. My question leads into that, and I'm wondering, is that the best repair? Is there a better way to do that? Is this a design flaw in the original plan of the building that maybe it could be done a little differently and we don't have to do this again somewhere down the road?
They did say that with that steel plate, there's a new way that it's done. What we have on our building is the old style, the way they've done it. There is a new process that they use, and they said that that would be what they'd be looking at switching over to.
Would this be considered a permanent fix then?
Yeah.
So
Now, I know there was no discussion of warranty and stuff, but in talking with them, I said, well, you know, how long would we be good for? And I can't quote him on it, but he said you'd probably be good for 50 years, but that's just, you know, talking between ourselves.
if we had to prioritize and do this over 2 years, is there things you can pick and choose and do in an order that would?
I think the issue with that is, with all this work, it would involve a lot of scaffolding. And the thought is, for cost savings, if they do it all in one shot, it would be taken care of as the scaffolding's up there. So there would be a cheaper cost on that.
Mr. Johnson?
They were talking stainless steel also instead of the regular steel, so the rusting issue should disappear.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Ron?
And I'm always available. If anyone thinks of anything, please feel free to contact me. I'm always available to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron, for your update.
Sure.
There were a couple other urgent needs within the study, and we've kind of already addressed the health and human service issue. That they'll be funding in their project, and then the district attorney will. There's just a few little security updates for the victim witness area, and then the privacy issue in the register of probate. They'll be building some walls and getting that up and running. Oops. So. This is kind of just a shot of what they're, this isn't true design, but kind of what the thought process is on the second floor. And then here they'll be doing some issues with the victim witness, fixing the victim witness area and district attorney's piece to make that higher security, and then building walls in with a third floor as a probate office. And total above cost for those two is $225,000, but again, $178,000 of that will be funded in the Health and Human Services Fund, and the remainder will be part of the capital improvement plan. Oh, why am I having struggles with this today? Okay, for those of you that had items in the capital improvement plan, there's 3 items that have been put on postponement, kind of. The clerk of courts had an additional courtroom and audio video upgrade, and we postponed that to 2019 for the amount of $32,000. And the maintenance department had an upgrade to their light touch lighting system, and that has also been postponed until 2019 for $80,000. The last one is $120,000 that we had postponed because it was for federal mandates that were not going to occur till 2020. So we were going to postpone this till 2019. It was $120,000. However, the law enforcement committee is really looking at this whole upgrade situation, and they're gonna make a recommendation to the finance committee. So you may be seeing an amendment coming to the board floor as to refund that project and maybe address some other communication issues that the law enforcement center is currently having. So just want to point that out, that might be coming. We would probably just use fund balance to fund that 120,000 or any additional that comes in, but we'll have to get a recommendation from law enforcement committee on that one. Last but not least, the last capital improvement project that's in the budget is the highway facility project, which we currently have budgeted for $27.6 million approximately, and we're estimating about 27.865 of a bond issue, and we would anticipate that issue to occur in June of 2018. $958,000 we were going to originally have in the bond issue that we were going to do here in the fall. But since we are not doing that issue, we still want that pre-construction phase to be completed so we can get a true cost of what we're anticipating for the actual construction phase of that project. So we're anticipating that $958,000 will first be funded by the highway operations unrestricted position or their available cash. And then upon completion of that pre-construction phase, the initial resolution authorizing that debt, and it would be in the amount not to exceed whatever comes out of that pre-construction phase, we anticipate occurring in 2018. And then the debt service payment for that would begin in March of 2019. So that project is in the budget, and it is considered that we're going to move forward with that, but understanding that we'll be upfronting some of the county's cash to fund that prior to the initial resolution coming to the county board. Okay, the proposed property tax. The county's equalized value actually increased 4.74%, which is actually a really good increase for the county. The county 2008 proposed tax levy increases 5.84% or $1.5 million, which I kind of already discussed where that's coming into play. By applying the 2018 proposed tax levy to the total equalized value, the levy impact on the taxpayer is about 1% or 7 cents per $1,000 property value, or $7 on a $100,000 home. The unused capacity of 2.3 million would be an additional 58 cents per thousand or $58 on a property value. So that's your unused debt capacity right there. We will still be not using the full capacity that we have. Just as a note, the state of Wisconsin portion should be reduced on the taxes by 0.16 per $1,000 property value. So as you can see, the equalized value, what it's done, 2.84% last year, 4.79% this year for 2018 budget. The 2017 adopted versus the 18 proposed, we're actually reducing our operating levy by our operating levy for operations by $960,154. But we are reducing our capital levy by $3 million for a total operating levy of $2.1 million. And again, to offset, we have the reduction to the debt service levy of $646,000, and the special purpose levy is an increase of $17,206, and that's all in the library aid program. Well, not all of it. A little bit of it is in state special charges. So, and I've heard this a lot, who has a $100,000 value, and so I just kind of went out and looked. Waupaca County, its median home value, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, is about $137,300. And based on that home value, with a tax calculation is based on a tax rate of $6.80 per thousand of equalized value. Tax bill for levied in 2017 for the 18 budget will be about $933.64 on that value of a home. And as compared to what was levied in 16 for the 2017 budget of $924.03. So the median home value will see a $9.61 on their property tax bill for the county's portion. It's always scary to look at fund balance usage, but we have been very vigilant in trying to get our fund balances growing, and I think we've done a good job at that. And so we are utilizing fund balance, but we still remain under my projections that we'll still be over policy in the general fund by almost $3 million. So utilizing that fund balance has not had a significant impact, and we use quite a bit, but I think that moving forward we'll still be in a really good position. And if you want to see the projected fund balances by all funds, what we're projecting out, that's on section 1, page 11 of your book. I didn't struggle this bad the other day. Revenue highlights can be found on section 1, pages 15 to 18. It goes through, kind of gives you a breakdown of increases and decreases to revenue. It's a little bit of a weird situation this year because reducing the WCI operations and also the Lakeview Manor operations, the revenue and expenditure adjustments were really kind of difficult to explain, but I tried my best. The expenditure highlights are also found on section 1, page 19 to 22. And if you want to see the full capital improvement program for both the governmental funds and the highway operations fund, that can be found in section 9, pages 85 to 97. As Supervisor Fedorowicz mentioned earlier, on November 8th, the Finance and Human Resources Committee will formally pass the 2008 proposed tax levy and tax resolution for the county board to approve. Any questions, comments, or inquiries may be addressed with a member of the Finance Committee or myself to be considered at that date. November 14th, the public hearing will be held regarding the 2018 budget, and at that same meeting, the 2018 resolution adopting the recommended property tax levy and tax rate will be brought before the board for final approval.
Questions? Now's the time to ask. Mr. Crispin.
I know I asked this at executive committee, and I was interested in her, or I was impressed by her answer, and I'll ask it again just for the sake of somebody that wasn't at that executive committee meeting. Looking forward over the hill, what do we anticipate after our borrowing for the county highway shop in next year's budget, as far as staying kind of equal, or are we going to take a big jump next year?
What right now through what we're projecting, looking at the future is starting with that 1% or 7 cents. So if you continue to do that over the next 3 years to 4 years, you'll be able to help offset that debt levy increase, and this is kind of help preparing for that. And this then what we'll be doing is doing a full financial management plan and really looking at projections and how that debt will come into play, because highway operations depreciates their assets and they put that within their rates. So I'm anticipating, if I get that out into a long-term plan, that highway operations will be able to fund a portion of that principal payment based upon what depreciation they've applied for the building. So I'm hoping that we can somehow get that, and obviously that'll be something we'll be working on the next few months, because that's going to be imperative as far as how we're going to move forward. But that's how I anticipate it, and I'm not sure if I answered it the same way. In 2000, I don't have it, I actually changed my slide from the executive committee update, but there's a pretty large drop in debt service payment 2020, between 21 and 22. And that's really where I'm focusing to say, okay, there's where that debt drops. What do we do from now until that point to get it leveled? And the hope is by that date, we're using our full capacity and we're paying for all of our capital projects with levy itself. And there's no more, so then you'd have you would only have the building plus I think one more issuance that we would still be paying down on. But that's really what we're focusing on.
Question, can you hear us back there? You can.
As long as they're happy, that's all I care.
Okay. Huh?
I just turned it off, so maybe they did it
Okay.
before.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Nygaard?
Just another question, going back to the Health and Human Service fund balance, is that what's, I've been hearing a little bit about new positions and being budget neutral. And so I was just wondering where the funds are coming in to pay for the new positions and what's happening to their fund balance.
Though the new WCI operations for the first year in the 17 budget took a slight levy support, but Health and Human Services levy did not increase. But what they did is they took that levy support and applied that towards the whole reorganization piece of that. Ultimately, when they presented their original budget, it was budget neutral. With all the new positions. A lot of the positions are funded by grant funding and other charges for services. They're charging for their services. So a majority of it was covered with other funding sources, and they were only needing to apply the levy that they had originally had set out for Waupaca County Industries and applied it towards just applying with those resources. The only fund balance usage in the Health and Human Services Department is the $178,000 that they are going to use to remodel the second floor for those positions. However, again, we're anticipating that in 2019 they'll be able to apply for grant funding of $155,000. So basically, they're going to be restoring that in 19. But to be transparent, they wanted to make sure that the county board was fully aware of what they were doing.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. McClellan?
When I look at that, in regard to what we were just talking about, isn't that over 12 positions, and does that grant cover all fringe benefits and everything for the next year? And for 2018, what happens in 2019 if our pilot, President Trump, changes things and we don't have that money coming in? Are we stuck with 12 more positions? I mentioned that to a few people in my area, and they just said, hey, if you were adding 12 positions to the Sheriff's Department or the Highway Department, we'd be all excited about it. But if you're adding 12 positions to Health and Human Services, which we don't understand, and we have to pay for down the line, we're not excited about that. And that's where I'm sitting on this topic. So can you explain, one, is it funded just for 1 year? And two, does it stay with us forever, or is it just a 1-year position on these positions as long as the grants are covering fringes and everything?
I don't know the details behind it. I'd have to request assistance from the Health and Human Services management area. But as far as the CCS program, most of the positions are funded within the CCS program, and that program is fully funded. And so a majority of the positions were fully funded. They eliminated one position to create another position, and then there's a lot of shuffling around, but there's basically a reorganization piece within that department. And when you look at the budget, you'll see a huge decrease in contracted services because out of WCI, they're paying for contract services to provide the production area of WCI. So you see a huge reduction in contracted services, but yet their charges for services, they're charging back for their on rates for anything that's not funded by grants.
This is a meeting that we should, for information and questions. I do see Mr. Price. Do you have anything to add to that? If you want to come forward.
I think I'd just echo a lot of what Heidi was saying, but I'd also say with this particular budget and the switching of the positions of the restructure, this is probably the most significant commitment to mental health and behavioral health services that we've made in the county, and I don't even know how long, certainly since I've been here, and I don't know how long before that. And so the positions that are being covered by grants, I mean, actually any of our positions, any of the positions up in Health and Human Services, if somebody makes a change at the federal level and it kind of wipes out either that funding or things like that, it's on us to look at either can we cover that with the existing funds that we have, or is that something that we have to make a change and no longer provide those services. And so I think with all of our positions, that's where we're held. And so the positions that we have coming forward, we definitely have reimbursement that can follow and billing ways and structures to do that. But we also have positions that are going to have a huge return on investment. If we have folks that aren't going into deep end services, we can apply those dollars that we have committed to deep end services back into prevention pieces. And so the support features that I think all these positions will provide will have an effect not only on our department, but other resources across the county.
Any other questions for Mr. Price, as long as he's up here? Mr. Murphy, Jerry Murphy, please.
Yes, I'd like to echo some of the things that Chuck has mentioned and Heidi has mentioned. I've been on that committee for 14 years and chaired it for I can't remember how many years. And if you notice the levy amount that Health and Human Services, the biggest total number of positions in the county, county government that is, if you notice our levy request, there hasn't been any in recent years. It's all because of Chuck, Shannon, Erica, how they work with these various programs, how they're able to get funding for them, how they're able to have internal funding from as they say, charges and that. So Mr. McClone has a valid question as far as what's going to happen down the line, but I would say look to the past with the changes that have been made and with no extra impact on the levy. I think that we have a track record of doing an excellent job of shepherding the dollars of our constituents. So I'm convinced that if there is some removal of funding, we'll deal with it without coming back and saying we need an extra pot of money.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Price. If we got anything else to say, or that's good.
I mean, I'd just say, you know, with that, we have, with our department and access to the different grants that we have, I mean, we're fortunate in that way, or we have that benefit that we have different funding streams that we can look to and tap into. And maybe we haven't always done that in the past, but every year and throughout the year, we're tapping into what's out there, what's available. Does it make sense for us to either bring a new program in or tap into different funding resources? And so, you know, I think just to say that every year we try to figure out how do we come in at the zero, but still provide services, and we've been able to do that and grow at the same time.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Heidi? If not, what is your phone number, Heidi?
My work number.
I'll just say, if you have any questions after you leave here, reach Heidi's office, and she can answer it in a professional way. Dick Keppinger can't, but Heidi can. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Good job. What we're going to do right now is take a short break. Okay, just an observation. Some of us are not putting the mic close to our mouth. You know, we're putting it here, and we cannot hear entirely back there. In fact, I couldn't hear some of you up here. But anyhow, just remember, the mic's close to the mouth. Okay, we will go on to the ordinances and amendments of the General Code of Ordinances. Item A, 2017-641, amendment to the Chapter 34 petition number Z-020-17, Town of Union. Stephen Bauer for a zoning map amendment from AE district to RR-O district on approximately 2 acres.
So the intention behind this rezone is to separate this gentleman's house and other accessory structures from his farm field. He's looking at potentially either selling or selling either the land or the structure separately. So he wants to create them on separate parcels. Now, and this is within farm preservation, so that's why they're rezoning it to the rural residential overlay, which is the RRO, and he is using one development right in the process.
Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Fedowitz, is that for approval? And a second by Mr. Quistman. Discussion or comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
We go down to resolutions. Resolution A, resolution number 22-17-18, cooperation agreement, Central Wisconsin Housing Region.
Now therefore, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 66.0301, Waupaca County and the Central Wisconsin Housing Region agree to cooperate in the submission of an application for such funds and agree to cooperate in the implementation of a submitted CDBG program as approved by the Department of Administration.
Motion by Mr. Johnson for approval, second by Mr. Nygaard. Any questions or discussion? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
Resolution number 23-17-18, donation acceptance ballistic helmets.
Now therefore, be it resolved that Waupaca County Board of Supervisors accepts the donation received in the amount of $5,760 for the purpose of purchasing ballistic helmet.
There's a motion by Mr. Gerald Murphy and a second by Mr. Ellis. Questions or discussion? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
Resolution number 24-17-18, 2018 staffing, new positions / expansions.
Now therefore, let it be resolved that the Waupaca County Board of Supervisors does hereby approve the new position expansions for 2018 as listed above.
Is there a motion for approval? Motion by Mr. Wilfer, second by Mr. Sorensen. Questions or discussion? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 21-3.
Resolution number 25-17-18, 2018 Waupaca County Employee Wages and Salaries.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Waupaca County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize an annual compensation increase of 2.5% effective 1/1/2018 for wages and salaries of employees paid in accordance with the Waupaca County Employee Wage Schedule.
Is there a motion by Supervisor Craig for approval? A second by Mr. Jonley. Questions or discussion? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
Last resolution is resolution number 26-17-18, opioid lawsuit.
Waupaca County authorizes and agrees to be bound by the engagement lender that hereby directs the appropriate officers of Waupaca County to execute the engagement letter on behalf of the county. And be it further resolved, county shall endeavor and faithfully perform all actions required of the county in relations to the claims contemplated herein and the engagement letter, and hereby direct all county personnel to cooperate with and assist the law firm in relation thereto.
Is there a motion for approval? There is a motion by Mr. Nygaard. A second by Mr. Rowan. Discussion? Questions? Yes, Mr. Zog.
Mr. Chairman, at the WCA conference, Andy Phillips from Von Briesen made a presentation on this, and I've got a copy here. I think I'll leave it by Joe's office if anybody wants copies of some of the points, but suffice it to say what Andy said, we probably won't see any action or any funds in our lifetime on this thing after all the attorneys fight over everything. So that was his opinion from a fellow attorney at law. So.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Mr. Nygaard.
There isn't any cost to the county to be involved in this action, though, and it is making a statement as to take a position on this opioid problem, so.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Ellis.
Is there a way to honestly verify that there is no cost involved in getting involved with lawyers? That always sounds like that's money.
Our attorney will address this.
The cost that the county is going to incur is going to be employee resource time. So the litigation is going to be done by outside counsel. The data that is going to be used to support the claim that the county has actually incurred costs related to the opioid epidemic. So that would be law enforcement costs, jail staff costs, behavioral health costs, my costs for bringing commitments for people who are addicted to drugs, those sorts of things, court costs. Someone is going to have to gather the data of what costs the county has incurred. And that's going to be our employees providing information to what's called an independent litigation service. So that's a vendor that's contracted with the outside counsel to work with counties to gather the data, and then they'll compile it in support of the facts that we're alleging as costs incurred in the actual field related to the opioid addiction. So my assumption is that there's going to be meetings with the independent litigation service with county staff to say, this is the data we have, this is where we keep it, here's the data, you can compile it. So it's likely going to be someone from the jail, a representative from the sheriff's office, representative from behavioral health. Those children and family services have been greatly affected by this. So it's going to be staff time, but there's not going to be nobody's going to have to cut a check.
Does that answer your question?
More or less.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, if you go to a restaurant and you only tip 10%, you're kind of looked at as a cheapskate. Why is our favorite attorney in here for 10%? Because like maybe he just wanted to get on for the ride?
I think I didn't attend any of the WCA presentations at the conference. Mr. O'Connell was here. I don't know if you were here the day when Mark O'Connell spoke about it. So I think he addressed Wisconsin Counties Association involvement and Attorney Phillips' role specifically. And I guess I don't recall specifically what he said, if somebody else wants to comment on that. But this is a push that's being put together statewide by Wisconsin Counties Association, and Attorney Phillips is their attorney. So.
Good question, Bob. Thank you, Ms. Mullins. Somebody else? Please vote. Oh.
Just a quick
Yep, sorry.
If we don't join with the rest of the counties that are in the lawsuit, we would not benefit from any rewards that are reaped from this process. personally, I think that we should belong. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24 to 0.
Okay, for my short report here, of course, it's been a very busy month for many of us with the budget meetings, the executive meetings, and East Central Regional Planning meetings. And by the way, I sent Patricia Craig in my place last Friday because I had to be in a Stevens Point meeting instead. And do you have anything to report from that meeting? Pat, was it entertaining? Good?
I always enjoy learning new things, and East Central Regional Planning is the meeting that I attended, their quarterly meeting, along with Dwayne Federwitz and Gary Barrington. And they go through the business that they have done and what they're anticipating. And so it was very informative. The various people who are in charge, the different planners from transportation, gave us updates, so it was very good. Thank you.
You betcha. Thanks for going. I did have a guest come with me to the Wisconsin Counties Mutual Insurance meeting on Friday at Stevens Point. This was on the claims, county claims, and I asked Mandy Welch, our administrator coordinator, to come with me, since she's also the human resource director, just to see what every month we go through with about, I think, 23 or 24 claims from not all the counties all around the state. Many of them are lawsuits, and many, many dollars involved for consideration and that type of thing. So I appreciate Mandy going along, and I hope you found it interesting. The other thing is, too, we had the fall conference with Wisconsin Counties Association. And I apologize, I had to back out again at the last minute. I had something, if you medical people know, I had cellulitis come about my ear, my face, my eye. It's infection of the cells, which spreads rapidly and goes into your eye. It's bad stuff. So I had to go to Apple for treatment every day. And when I asked if I could just come back Tuesday for treatment, they says, no, you've got to be there. I had to be there Saturday even. So with that being said, they asked me if I'm under any stress. I'm not under any stress. I told them, for crying out, don't ask me that. But that accentuates that. But we did have a nice group going to the Counties Association, and I'm sure there's somebody that'd like to enlighten us what happened. Fred, you were there. You got anything? Zog?
Oh, you're talking to me or looking over there? Yeah, I do have something.
Okay.
Hey, Mayor, use your microphone.
Sorry to confuse you, but you have to come forth here to the up here front.
See, Joe, just come still. You're chairman, you give me orders. I won't bore you with more of the opiate thing, but I did go to a session on that. We had held a human services person there from Chippewa County, and I believe from Sauk County again. The key thing I took out of that is the state's kind of divided between where is heroin and where is methamphetamine. And there was two discussions there. One, Highway 29 is kind of the dividing line. North of 29 is meth, south of 29 is heroin. And the guy from Chippewa kind of cut it off as in a diagonal line of the state. Northwest corner would be more meth and heroin down by us here. And there was just talk about how to treat it more. It's evolving to being treated not so much as a crime anymore, but as a disease. And i.e. that's the way the drug courts are being established in a lot of counties, along with law enforcement to, you know, get these people back to be productive members of society, because the costs are just getting horrendous as far as extra costs of health and human services, extra costs of law enforcement, and so on and so on. It just never stops. Be that as it may, one of the more interesting things I was at, I'll just read you the statement of county government authority, administrative structure, options, and roles and responsibility of county board members. Some of this stuff is ancient history, and some of it is kind of different that I didn't even realize. Being a member, major in political science, I had to poke Mr. Penny after going through about an hour of the meeting. I said, I know most of this stuff. I'm going to leave now, so I hope he took some extra notes to correct me. The breakdown of government, you've got the federal, you've got the state, and then you've got the county. And the different responsibilities vary. I don't want to get into a long dissertation, but whatever we do here is mandated by the state of Wisconsin. Because basically, if you want to make it real simple, way back when we were a real rural society, people in Madison or Milwaukee, they didn't know where the hell Waupaca, Wisconsin was, or maybe Waupaca wasn't even a city yet. So somehow or another, they had to get people out in these hinterland areas to get some kind of government organized, hence the county government was organized. And the only powers we have are those which are given by the state. And the state has home rule, we do not, I believe is what the point was. And let's see here. I think instead of, I don't want to hold everybody up and go through all this stuff, but again, I'll leave this by the clerk's office, and if you want to page through it, a lot of it's pretty cut and dried, but there's certain rules and regulations. I saw something in there that said that the reason the meeting's on the third Tuesday of the month, is that state mandated, Dick? I thought there was some mention of that.
I have no idea.
But it was good, I mean, little intricacies like that, but. So in any event, I'll leave this at the clerk's office, anybody wants to take a look at it. It's some interesting stuff, some not so interesting, but. And also there, apparently Kalahari wasn't big enough because people were sitting in the aisles and out the doorways and at the breakout sessions as well as the first general session, so. But overall, it was well worth the time.
Thank you, Mr. Zog. As any good quarterback does, he looks one way but throws the other way, so that's why I looked over there.
You intercepted it.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on the conference? Carl, you got anything to add? Whoop, Mr. Penny's, I think.
Go ahead, Carl.
Go ahead, Carl.
Well, one thing on, I went on that highway thing there, and about the only dollars they're gonna bring in, they raised these electric cars up to $100 when their year's up on their registration thing, to get a little extra because they don't use any gas, so they figured they could get a little extra on them. I don't think there's that many electric cars around, but maybe there is. And I guess counties are all gonna get a little money to do the road work, but that total highway thing is nothing major there yet. They're just keep putting it off and putting it off, so there wasn't much there. And then the human service thing there, they broke us down into 22 sections in the state there, and we just happen to be section number 10. We're together with Winnebago, Outagamie, and Calumet County, us four. And like Milwaukee and Green Bay and Madison, they're just one county. And like the north and west, some of them are in 6 or 7 different together. So yeah, when they got that 3.6 million here cut a couple years ago, it's pretty hard to try and operate the same way as they did, you know, without cutting too many things out. So that's about all I had for down
Good.
there.
Thank you, Carl. I think, Casey, did we not get an extra $300,000 from the state for maintenance?
Yes.
Okay, that's a help in the next biennium budget, correct?
Split over the next year, I believe.
Oh, okay, good, thanks. Anybody else that would, Mr. Penny, I'm sorry.
Please keep in mind that what I'm going to tell you is strictly my opinion, not necessarily the opinion of others, which happens quite frequently in our board meetings. But in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, the complete success of the Wisconsin Counties Association annual conference, believe it or not, and I emphasize complete, is based on the outcome of a Green Bay Packer football game. And let me tell you why. There were a number of vendors there that went together and put on a program for us for the Packer game on that particular Sunday, which was with the Cincinnati Bengals. And as you entered the room where they had this, they had 4 or 5 big TV sets there, and as you entered, they gave you beads to wear, green and gold beads, and tickets for drawings are going to take place. And it was taking place in a room probably at least twice as big as this one. And this year's attendance at the meeting there was somewhere around 850 people. And as you entered, they had big round tables there that seated 8 or 10 people, all with nice tablecloths on and all kinds of Packer paraphernalia there. They had horns, they had whistles, they had things to shake and horns to blow, and you name it. And everybody was dressed with, most of them were dressed with Packer outfits and so forth. But as the game progressed, we fell behind, and as you know, Aaron Rodgers brought us back at the very end, and we won it with a kick of a field goal. And you'd be surprised. I would say there were probably of the group, there were probably better than 300 or 400 people there, and everything just seemed to change, and that seems to make a big difference as what takes place. Everybody is so happy, and things go so smooth for the next couple of days that it's hard to believe. But that's my opinion. And I went to one session there, the same one that Fred went to, and he was sitting next to me, and well, he was taking notes faster than most court reporters can take them. I was really surprised, but he did a good job. And this was the session on county boards, and the one thing that he didn't mention that I like to emphasize is you want to keep in mind that the county board is a very, very powerful organization. It can do a lot of things. If you don't believe so, read that chapter of the statutes that has to deal with county boards, and you'll find that, yes, they are powerful. This chapter will tell you what county boards can do, what county boards can't do, and what county boards must do. It's very, very interesting, so you should try and keep that in mind. Also, I went to this session on drugs that Fred's touched on, and there were the three people panel there
One of them was a doctor from up around Chippewa Falls that had just gotten back from a meeting on drugs out east someplace. I think it was at Harvard University. And I can't remember where the lady was from, but the guy was a sheriff from Bayfield County. And even way up there in the very northern part of our state, you can't believe the amount of things that are happening as far as drugs are concerned. And like Fred said, they divided the state, whether you go north to south or east to west. It's one section is methamphetamines and the other section is opiates. So it's something to keep in mind. And there was a couple things that came up that this sheriff from Bayfield County, if you can remember back when cigarette smoking was getting to be a problem, and every magazine you picked up told you about, be careful about smoking, it can be hazardous to your health. And he suggested that these people that put forth these magazines should be considering maybe doing something along the same line with the drug problem, which I thought was great. And one lady said that she can't believe that our legislative people would be interested in okaying the use of marijuana in our state, because it's been known and it's been found that once they start using marijuana, that's the first step into getting into the heavy drugs. And I think that she was right on that. But otherwise, I guess I'm sure some of the others had attended some of the other sessions that I did, and hopefully maybe they will get up and say a few words. But before I step down, I'd like to emphasize this fact. It has nothing to do with the convention, but for all of you here today that have children or grandchildren, remember, today is Halloween Day, and tonight there'll be all kinds of little kids all over the country out there trick-or-treating. So if you have your children or grandchildren, be sure and emphasize that they're well chaperoned, because we don't want any tragedies, and there are some real weirdos running around out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penny, very good. So who else would like to talk about Mr. Rowan?
That's kind of a tough act to follow. Jack, you did a great job. I just wrote down a few things. It was interesting. I was talking about farming in Wisconsin, and it said that 1 in every 14 people are involved in the farming in regards to food inspections and farm machinery and keeping the soil and the water safe and transporting and manufacturing of food for the whole world. And talked about, I had another session that I went to where they were talking about the UW Extension, how they had been cut in their budget by $3.6 million, and what they're doing to make the most of what they've got, and more one-on-one with the constituents and the people that they serve in the UW system. And then another area we went into is Fuel for Wisconsin, and it was a Enbridge pipeline company, and I never realized, I knew that there was pipelines going through Wisconsin, but I wish I had a better blow up here, but it goes diagonally through the state of Wisconsin between Milwaukee and Madison all the way to Superior, where they're refined the fuels. And I had no idea that there was that much going through. Compared to 8,364 tankers a day it would take, it replaces 3,286 rail cars transporting crude oil to this refinery, and that means a big deal for Wisconsin farmers and people that are working. And it's you hear about all the problems they have out in South Dakota and trying to get a pipeline put in, and here we've got actually four of them that are working order right now. And they emphasized that they weren't going to be building any more new ones for a while, that they're going to just maintain the ones that they have, and they increase the pressure so that they can actually transport more crude oil. So it was a good conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. Anybody else like to make a contribution? Well, thank you very much for those that went to represent Waupaca County. We generally, I think, our county has got a number of good representatives every year, and I felt terrible not being there. It's like a fraternity, so, but thank you. With that being said, we'll go down to appointments. Would like to appoint Supervisor Dave Johnson to the Health and Human Services Board. Could I have a motion for approval? A motion by Mr. Murphy and a second by Mr. Spearings. Any questions regarding that appointment? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Item B is reappoint Marilyn Herman and Pat Craig to the Owls Board for 3-year terms. Motion by Mr. Ellis and second by Mr. Zog. Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
You ready here? Okay.
Sorry, it paused on me.
Item C is we'd like to appoint Julie Meyer, Vice President of the First National Bank of Waupaca, to the Waupaca County Revolving Loan Fund Committee.
And I'd just like to make a note on that, that as of Monday, the name of that bank has changed to Bank First National.
The motion by Supervisor Craig. Your second? Second by Supervisor Pullman. Any questions?
Is she still with, pardon me, is Julie still with First National? Because a lot of employees have changed.
Before we want to vote too, I certainly want to thank Jim Olson, the Senior Vice President, who was on that committee and part of the First National Bank. He is retiring, and thank him for his service. So, okay, please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
Next, we'd like to reappoint Jim Gazer, Veteran Service, to the Veteran Service Commission for a 3-year term. A motion by Mr. Nygaard, a second by Mr. Sorensen. Any questions? Please vote.
Last chance to vote. Motion carries 24-0.
You're doing the budget today, so I brought some money along. Short.
Announcements and correspondence. You've got the WCDDC monthly report, Town of Caledonia letter, which is very nice, commending our highway department. And also, the October meeting treats are courtesy of Supervisor Terry Murphy. Thank you, Terry. I'm glad you said they were non-fattening, no calories. Great job. Don't forget, the budget hearing is November 14th, 9 a.m. And again, as you go home and have any questions regarding a budget you heard today or go through here, give Heidi a call at her office. Thank you so very much. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn by Mr. Handrick and a second by Mr. Terry Murphy. Please vote. Did I? Joe McClone, did you vote?
Thank you, Joe. Motion carries 24-0.
That was for $2 million, Joe.
have my question before you leave, and it's what is the policy on taking cars in and then like other